Hello, dear friends. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Mukesh English. This is Mukesh Soni. In this video, we are going to have a discussion of fourth semester BA Generic English Model Question Paper discussion under Bangalore City University BCU. The duration for the examination 2 hours 30 minutes, maximum marks 60. To begin with, the unit 1 that consists literary section, it has the weightage of 40 marks. The novella has the weightage of 30 marks. The poems and the TED Talks have the weightage of 10 marks. So let's begin. Answer any two of the following questions in about a page each. So three questions each for 5 marks will be asked. You need to opt any two questions from the novella. So first question for the 5 marks from the novella DWEEPA. Describe the relationship of Nagaveni and Krishnaya. The novella Dweepa follows the lives of Ganpaya and his wife Nagaveni, his father Duggaja, and the struggles of the village of Hosamanahalli as it faces complete submersion due to the Sharavati hydroelectric project. The novella is set in the Malnad region of Karnataka on an expedition to the nearby town to find labor and stock up on provisions before the rains. Nagaveni visits a family where she meets Krishnaya, who is a bonded labor in her father's house. Krishnaya requests Nagaveni to stay with her or in her town, so he also joins Nagaveni to his town, Hosamanhalli. So what happens? The tension rises as the water level rises. The labor is scarce. Duggaja, Duggaja, Ganpaya's son, Duggaja, Ganpaya's father, passes away. Now Ganpaya feels insecure about the bond and growing comfort and fondness his wife shares with the bonded labor from a natal home. So he feels very uncomfortable when he finds the relationship which is growing between Nagaveni and Krishnaya. Following confrontation Ganpaya has with Krishnaya, where Ganpaya lays out his insecurities and Krishnaya dismisses them. Krishnaya says that he and Nagaveni are like siblings. The two men grow amicable with each other while Nagaveni remains silent. As cabin fever brews one night, the dam of unsaid passion between Krishnaya and Nagaveni is breached. The two of them are both horrified and satiated by the night of passion. As the love triangle between Ganpaya, Nagaveni, and Krishnaya gets deeper and more complex, each of the characters gets more isolated and marooned from the others. Question number 2. How has Na D'Souza portrayed the effects of dams on villages? The novella Dweepa follows the lives of Ganpaya, his wife Nagaveni, and his father Duggaja, and the struggles of the village of Hosamanhalli as it faces complete submersion due to the Sharavati hydroelectric project. The novella is set in the Malnad region of Karnataka. The village is flanked by the river Sharavati and Sita Parvata, a hillock covered with a lush vegetation and a bald top. Everything changes with the Sharavati hydroelectric project. As with any dam project, large tracts of land, including villages, agricultural land, common grazing lands, or excuse me, common grazing lands or village commons or the forest are submerged together with the lifestyle, values, culture, and memories. The government arranges to compensate the displaced landlords with land, but only those who bribe the officers are given land elsewhere. The bonded laborers have no land, so they are not covered by the compensation schemes, and the future is uncertain, especially since they are expected to move with their owners. Given Ganpaya is not wealthy enough to bribe the submersion office, his application is lost. He decides to stay back with his wife and father and face the consequences of the change in the landscape thanks to urban centric notion of modernization. What is the role of government in the novella? At the time when D'Souza was writing this novel, there was a growing sense of disillusionment and disenchantment with rapid modernization and industrialization. While in the initial years after independence, The idealistic model of development propelled the nation in all spheres. As the time passed, the public began to feel left out of decision making, going against the very idea of socialism, which ensures development for all. Sadly, this was the beginning of this major problem which persists till today with development in India. Local communities are often not consulted with government's plan to implement special economic zones, dams, airports, etc. The state tends to take on the role of all knowing, paternalistic or patronizing parent, deciding what is good for citizens. Since governance is primarily urban in nature, it tends to leave out or ignore non quantifiable aspects of people's lives, such as material culture, the sense of belonging, and attachment to the homes and lands, the relationship between the identity and land, etc. Thus, the novella not only questions development and the destruction it brings out, but it also brings out the notions of development, displacement, and compensation. So these are the moving further. Apart from monetary compensation for the houses, land, and crops, do rehabilitation programs take into account the grief and the loss people feel when forced to leave their homes and the sense of alienation and isolation they feel when they are displaced in other locations and treated as outsiders? For example, Duggaja reacts physically every time the thought of having to leave his home crosses his mind. He says he felt weak in the legs and sank to the floor. He loved his piece of land with the attachment a woman feels for her mother's house. Urban centric notions of development and decision making are just a part of the problem. The novella also draws the reader's attention to government apathy and corruption. The officers use different ways to confuse the simple village folk and cheat them, and the need for bribes to move the files for compensation are an open secret. So much so that Harbanga Hegde even tells Ganpaya to pay a few rupees as a bribe to retrieve his file, which the officers say is lost. This starts a vicious cycle. Ganpaya has no money for a bribe, so his file is lost, and he decides he won't leave his home unless he is certain of the compensation amount. The compensation amount cannot be ascertained without the file, and so Ganpaya and his family remain in the village despite the rising water levels. So these are the three questions for 5 marks from the novella. Now, answer any two questions out of three questions for 10 marks each. Discuss how Dvipa acts as a metaphor for isolation and contest notions of home and the relationship between land and identity. The sixth in a series of translated pieces or text from Indian languages in Dvipa, written by the renowned and the exceptionally talented Kannada author Na D'Souza and skillfully translated into English by Sushila Punita. In a secluded hamlet in the Sharavati basin in Karnataka, a family of three, consisting of a dying old man, his son Ganpaya, and his daughter-in-law Nagveni, face the danger of losing their house, their property, and the main source of income. Dvipa describes their predicament in addition to turning the land into an island due to the dam's construction. The advancing floods also start to have an impact on the marriage and send them to isolated lands. Dvipa is one of the few Kannada novels that describes the struggles of displacement caused by the building of dams much before the criticism of development started to emerge on the national scene through the struggles like Narmada Andolan. This local narrative has relevance because it expresses the experience of the Sharavati's regions dispossessed in their own words as it was 50 years ago. while also supporting the greater struggle of others who were similarly impacted elsewhere in a potent show of solidarity. It is the political edge of this heartbreaking story of dispossession rather than its inherent literary merit or its genre specific advantages of compression and intensity, which speaks to the current concerns of several social struggles in India today, giving the translated work contemporary relevance. Dvipa, which means island, lends itself to another important theme, isolation. As the water level rise and all the other residents of Hosamanahalli leave the village, Ganpaya, his wife Nagavani, and his father Duggaja are isolated from the world outside. Both Duggaja and Nagavani remark about how boring and monotonous life is in the absence of the rest of the village and how they can manage all the other challenge of living in isolation except loneliness. As the love triangle between Ganpaya, Nagavani, and Krishnaya gets deeper and more complex, each of the character gets more isolated and marooned from the others. Question number 2 for 10 marks. Dvipa is a story of the dangers of urban centric notions of development discussed. At the time when D'Souza was writing this novel, there was a growing sense of disillusionment and disenchantment with rapid modernization and industrialization, while in the initial years after independence, this idealistic model of development propelled the nation in all spheres. As the time passed, the public began to feel left out of decision making, going against the very idea of socialism, which ensures development for all. Sadly, unfortunately, this was the beginning of this major problem which persists till today with development in India. Local communities are not consulted when governments plan to implement special economic zones, dams, airports, etc. The state tends to take on the role of all the knowing, paternalistic, or the patronizing parent deciding what is good for the citizens. Since governance is primarily urban in nature, it tends to leave out or ignore non quantifiable aspects of people's lives, such as material culture, the sense of belonging, attachment to their homes and lands, the relationship between the identity and land, etc. Thus, the novella not only questions the development and the destruction it brings out, but also it contests the notions of development, displacement, and compensation. Apart from the monetary compensation for the houses, lands, and the crops, do rehabilitation programs take into account the grief and the loss people feel when they are forced to leave their homes and the sense of alienation and the isolation they feel when they are displaced in their locations or when they are treated as the outsiders? For example, Duggaja reacts physically every time the thought of having to leave his home crosses his mind. He felt weak in the legs and sank to the floor. He loved his piece of land with attachment, how a woman feels for a mother's house. Urban centric notions of development and decision making are just a part of the problem. The novella also brings out the reader's attention to government's apathy and corruption. The officers use different ways to confuse the simple village folk and cheat them, and also need for bribes to move the files for compensation are an open secret. So much so that Heramba Hegde even tells Ganapaya to pay a few rupees as a bribe to retrieve his file, which the officers say is lost. This starts a vicious cycle. Ganpaya has no money for a bribe, so his file is lost and he decides he won't leave his home until he is certain of the compensation amount. The compensation amount cannot be ascertained without the file, and so Ganpaya and his family remain in the village despite the rising water levels. Question number three for 10 marks. How does Na D'Souza deal with the issue of bonded labor in the novella? As we read the novel, we see multiple marginalized groups remaining voiceless, the most prominent being the villages in the face of government decisions and the bonded labors. Bonded labors are attached to the masters like commodities, and they are expected to uproot their lives and move as per their master's whims. They are not entitled to compensation since they do not own anything themselves, and post compensation and displacement, their situations are even more precarious since their masters may not necessarily continue agriculture in the new homes. Thus, with the arrival of Krishnaya and his blossoming affection for Nagveni, the bonded laborers are humanized for the first time in the novella. We see them as ordinary people with feelings, emotions, desires, fears, and ambitions, yet are constantly marginalized, dehumanized, and sidelined by society and tradition. So these are the 30 marks questions from the novella Dvipa. Now, answer any two questions out of four questions. Each question you need to attempt one question. At least you should attempt from poetry and TED Talk, each for 5 marks. So you need to attempt only two questions out of four. Question number one: appearances are deceptive. Elucidate with reference to the poem The Walrus and the Carpenter. This poem was written by Lewis Carroll, a writer renowned for writing child fiction. The Walrus and the Carpenter is a narrative poem famous for the themes of death and betrayal. It was first published in 1865. This poem speaks about a walrus and a carpenter who trick innocent young oysters and eat them after a walk on the seashore. The poem also deals with the idea of cunningness in human nature, the walrus and the carpenter as a representative of death. This poem is about two friends, Walrus and Carpenter, who walk along the beach at night. Strangely, the moon and sun were shining at the same time. They comment they comment on the bright sun and the sulky moon. Also, they seem unhappy with the bed of sand and think that the beach would be better without it. Soon they invite oysters to walk with them. The oldest oyster does not accept the offer, but four younger ones, they join them. Later, more oysters line up for the walk. The walrus intends to deceive oysters into thinking they are going to have a pleasant chat. Out of breath after a long walk, the oysters ask them to wait. Just then, they realize that they were going to be eaten. The walrus tries to show sympathy toward the poor creature, but the carpenter simply wants to eat them. They mercilessly eat all the oysters. The readers can learn from the wise decision made by the oldest oyster who refused to walk with them, and it saved his life. Deception, death, and wisdom are the major themes of this poem. Walrus and Carpenter intend to eat the oysters. That is why they ask them to join for a walk. Being wise, an older oyster understands the intention and does not join them. However, the younger oysters fall into the trap despite the warning of the fellow oyster. On a deeper level, the poem gives a profound message urging people not to follow leaders blindly. Question number two: why is the poet grateful that our memories fade with time? The poem titled Beyond Memories is written by Kannada poet, writer, literary historian, and critic and researcher G.S. Shivarudrappa. And this poem is translated by C.P. Ravikumar. This poem talks about how memories fade with time. How does memory become a tool of resistance? Beyond Memories poem is a reflection on time, memory, forgetting in four parts, each of the sections coherent with an individual, overreaching theme while retaining an overall cohesiveness to the poem. The first section of the poem uses a catalogue of images from nature to establish how forgetting a routine and natural part of existence is. No matter how beautiful or seemingly memorable an important event may be, its gradual fading from memory is inevitable. In the second section, the poet explores the relationship between existence and memory. It is often quoted how it is often quoted how every individual dies twice. The first is the actual physical death, while the second is the last time the person's name or memory is brought to mind. Just as how cultures and civilizations are a sum of culture, they produce our existence, and our relationships are a sum of our memories. In the third section, the poet celebrates forgetting, calling it a gift that makes our lives bearable, leading to the fourth section, which expounds the idea of willfully and mindfully forgetting, invoking the authority of the Jain tradition of renunciation. The poet reminds us that the true salvation only comes when we leave behind all those things that weigh us down: failures, victory, our pains, our pride. Third question from Simon's TED Talk: explain the law of diffusion of innovation as put across by the speaker in his speech. Simon Simon, having addressed the idea that people don't buy what you do, they buy what you believe, moves on in his TED Talk about inspiring leadership. He speaks to the law of diffusion of innovation, an explanation of how people are inspired to change, to adopt something new, to embrace motivation, innovation. Change does not happen to all people in the same way at the same time. Change has to crawl and crest before it finally conquers. To illustrate this notion, Simon introduces us our old friend called bell curve. He takes the bell curve and applies it to the people who are invited to change, to adopt novel ideas or behaviors, or to think and act differently. There are different categories of leaders as described in the law of diffusion of innovation. Simon grouped these categories in percentages with the relevance and competitiveness in service delivery. For example, some innovators occupy the lowest percentage of 2.5. Subsequently, there are early adopters, early and late majority laggards. The description of these groups of people surprised the audience when Simon claimed the acceptance of an idea requires the attainment of innovation stage, especially for the business persons. Being the first person to experience an innovation gives prior knowledge of its functionality. Thus, the initial experience dictates the idea's ultimate existence and hence its success. Now, the fourth question from the another TED Talk by Sparsh: what are the four simple steps to make impossible into I'm possible? The TED Talk was delivered by 13-year-old small boy Sparsh, who is suffering from osteogenesis imperfecta since he was born. The boy told that he has multiple screws and rods were placed in his body even after facing 130 fractures. His kind nature and motivating songs not only motivated him but every person who listened to. But the most fascinating thing that the small kid was his never give up attitude that was ingrained in him. Only two words are enough to make anyone motivated. These are impossible to I am possible. Sparsha explained few steps that he has used to convert impossible to I am possible. One is find your passion, never hold yourself back, help others, and dream big. In the first point, speaking about find a passion, he says that when he was 10 years old, he went through Indian classical vocal training and also learned American vocal lessons. With this, he found his passion, music. Music became his soul. The second point, never hold yourself back. He showcased his own purism, raga rap. Purism was made of pure and rhythm, whereas raga rap was made of raga and rap. Though all these, he made his first song named This Love Will Never Fade. This was a time when God changed his life, and this was a time when he got to know that life is not only limited to these physical problems he was facing, but he is still huge scope of improvement in other areas of life. This was so inspiring to him that till now he has written 11 songs on his own and has also received various accomplishments from various celebrities. This is the biggest accomplishment that the 13-year-old kid got in his early age. The third point Sparsha focused upon is help others. He explained with an example where he worked for a non-profit making organization, and in this he generated more than $500 million of revenue, such great revenue that a small kid with immense potential and intelligence had generated. He singled out a very good point that the biggest satisfaction of all our life is when we got to help change someone else's life for some betterment. The last point Sparsha delivered was dream big. He said that he wants to leave his footprints into the sand of legacies so deep that not even tsunami can erase it. He encouraged us by saying a line, don't you all want to be remembered? One more point which every listener should remember is that never give up your passion. Never give up on your passion, whatever the situation would be. As Sparsha's passion was music, he made it part of his life. The small kid, having such a brilliant mind and big dreams, we think that this is a gift from God that will open the eyes of each and every person in this world. He's the one who will change the life of every person, and as a result, will leave his footprints and cute face in every person's heart. So this is what we have discussed here so far, 40 marks questions from the novella, TED Talks. And dear friends, don't forget that I have mentioned here, I have already mentioned the links of all my videos of the novella, summary, TED Talks, all the three poems, all the links of my videos of 4 semester BA you can find in the description box. Okay, moving ahead to the unit 2 grammar section, that is for 20 marks. Here, attempt any one of the following questions. So you have here two choices. In this section, you have here two questions. One is here travel writing, one is here copywriting. You need to write copyright for a particular product. So create an ad copy for a wristwatch. So I have prepared here two ad here for the wristwatch. You can select any one. You can see there is a variety. The first one, Gen 5 smartwatch. Here you can see the smartwatch and with its features. Second one is the regular watch, regular wristwatch with its offer prices. So this question is more or less similar to the poster presentation. Here you need to show the product here and you need to write the content for the that's called as a copyright. Second one, you have another option is here, write a narrative or travel writing, very simple, write a travelogue. If you visit a place, how do you describe? You describe in the first person, you describe in the past tense. So when you visit a place, you need to select the place, you need to talk about the history of the place, the which are the places you visited over there, how was your experience during the travel, what's your feedback, positive, negative, and how do you promote it. So I am not given the answer for this question because I believe that every person has a writing skill and every person writes very differently. So you just keep in the mind that which place have you visited, you write down very in a very simple language without any grammatical errors. Only one thing, there should be sequence of each and every thought, there should be connectivity of all the thoughts. The next question you have here, email writing. So you three questions will be asked here. Out of three questions, you need to select two email writing. So each for 5 marks. So this is very important section. 10 marks for email writing. Great. Write an email to the principal of your previous college requesting a letter of recommendation for you to apply to a foreign university for higher education. So obviously from email address and to email address, subject request for recommendation letter. Dear sir, I was your student during the academic year 2019-22 in a commerce stream. At present, I'm working at IBM. I'm currently applying at the University of Edinburgh to pursue masters in statistics. As a part of the application process, I have been asked to provide a letter of recommendation from a professor, and I hope that you will consider writing such letter for me. I always appreciate the way you used to teach us with practical implications. I have attached a document with potential points to highlight to inform a general letter given my participation in your class, as well as brief paragraphs explaining my reasons for applying to each program. I can also share my application material or anything else which is much required. If you agree to write letter on my behalf, I'll send detailed instructions for how to submit each letter. Thank you for your time and for considering my request. Best regards, Mukesh. So first paragraph is repeated. Kindly ignore it. So this is the question for letter writing. Sorry, email writing. Second, email acknowledging the email, acknowledgement email. Write an email to kids issues acknowledging that you have received 100 pairs of school footwear as per your orders. So again, from and to email, subject, dear sir, with reference to our order dated 15th August 2023, wide invoice number so and so, we have received the kids issues for our store. We would like to thank you for sending the shoes in time as it's a festive season. Regards. So for signature. Third email, write an email, let email of appreciation to a student who has won a debate competition. So again, from address to address, subject. Remember, you have the email writing. So, dear Rahul, I'm proud of your achievement for receiving the first place in debate competition at national level. The institution, management, and staff have appreciated your achievement. You have left a footprint for all the students. I wish you good luck for your future endeavors. Regards. So, this is the email for appreciation. If you want, you can elaborate it, but I don't think so. Email should always be brief and concise. Just follow the format. So these are the questions for email writing for 5 marks, totally 10 marks. Now you have the last section of your question paper. Here you need to opt one question. One is a blog writing and one is a profile writing. So write a short blog on the top 3 hill stations of Karnataka. So here I would say that again, blog writing is similar to writing on any of the topics. Only one thing, whatever you write, it should be more creative, and people should feel interest to read what you write. So create the interesting opinions or interesting setting of your blog in the very beginning. Later you describe whatever is mentioned, like for you describe the different hill stations like Chikmagalur, BR Hills, etc., and also try to promote in your blog. That's about the blog writing. Then in option to blog writing, if you don't like blog writing, the most interesting one and the more scoring I would say here, short profile writing. And remember, this profile writing is not excuse me, the profile writing is not from the point of view of resume writing. Profile writing means to say, when you are writing, you are describing yourself on the social media platform. How brief, concisely, in a very polished manner, how do you show your profile? So you can look at the profile of this motivational speaker, Simarjit Singh, international motivational speaker, performance coach, growth catalyst, his quick bio, BBA, general management program, emerging leaders. You can go through his profile, very brief, very concise. If you want, you can also have a picture in the examination. You cannot make a picture here. Better to bring up the profile in this manner. There's one more answer I have tried to bring for you in a different way to bring out the profile writing. You can look at your two persons profile. One is Dr. Michael, one is M Biomed. So these two persons profile in very key points. So this is how you need to draft the profile for any key speakers or any of the software developer speaker. You need to imagine as far the examination is concerned, but as far the practical implications is concerned, you can prepare your own profile for the different social media platforms. This is not for resume. This question is for the social media platform. So, dear friends, this is how I have tried to answer all the questions. And don't forget to see the description box. In my description box, you can see here all the lessons, videos, links, DWEEPA, poems, TED Talks, email writing, especially because email writing is very important, 10 marks. You can see the links of all the videos in the description box. Just have a recapitulation with this format. This is a format of your question paper. 40 marks your section 1, unit 1, whereas 30 marks is a novella. 2 into 5, 5 marks 2 questions, and 10 marks 2 questions, and 5 marks 2 questions from poems and TED Talks. Then technical writing, 5 marks 1 question. Email writing, 5 marks 2 questions, total 10 marks email writing. And the social media content writing, blog, or we can say the profile writing, 5 marks. So dear friends, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like the video, click on the comment like button, subscribe the channel if you're not yet subscribed, and write in the comment box. Keep watching Mukesh English.